the skies, and chill was the wind as the land was covered in a veil of malice. Across the hill did ride a dread army of the night, cloaked in mist and fog, prepared to rain down death and destruction upon the land. And the people did crowd for a saviour, a noble soul to save them from their impending demise. Just as it seemed all was lost, in strode a mighty hero, clad in shivering metal from head to toe. Wielding a terrible broadsword, he did cleave his foes in two, smashing their ranks asunder with righteous fury. And when the day was done and the enemy strode across the fields in pieces, the people did turn to the warrior and say, "We shall name this day in your honor. Speak unto us your wisdom." The warrior said one word that day: epic.
One man, one Murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Plz. It begins now. Yes, indeed, folks, you're tuned into Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit. Welcome to the show, and so forth, yes. Right, okay, so, it's WoW, WoW, WoW. That's the whole point of the show. If you're tuned in for something other than WoW, then you may have made a mistake. There's certainly a possibility. Now, what have I got coming up in the show? I've got a sack full of things which will never fit into an hour and a half, but I'm going to try and do it anyway. Content, mucho content. I'll be discussing last week's
Second Wind.
Yes, yes, indeed. The continuity between one show and another, kind of like Lost, only it has a plot. So, I'll be doing that. We also have our features. We have No Cake News, and we have Rap in the Forums, and we would have had Ask the Murlocs, except for the fact that I'm staring at the file right now in my copy of Adobe Edition, and I'm going through it, and it looks okay, it looks fine. Press the export button. It comes out as a blank track every single time. I have no idea why. So that's just going to have to wait until I work out what the heck's going on with that. However, got loads of content, absolutely loads. Of course, Cupcake News, and Rap in the Forums. And some music to go with it. It's a recipe for disaster. Lovely. Now I'm sitting in a room that's very, very cold. Very, very, very cold, in fact, which kind of sucks. So, if you hear my teeth chattering or me falling off in some kind of TotalBiscuit-shaped icicle at some point, then just let me know, and if I'm gone for more than 10 minutes, please call the authorities and or the ambulance. Right, let's get on with this. Second Wind would be something we will be going on to right now, had I not had a very special email from somebody that I would like to read out as a priority. Right. You might remember on last week's show I was talking about the disparity between EU and US GMs. Well, I got a GM email me, which was pretty cool. It's pretty damn rare that I get to expose both sides of the argument from both different perspectives. Usually I'm going on player perspectives, my perspective, that kind of thing. Don't get Blizzard's perspective, generally because they don't tell you. However, in this case, there is an exception. His name is protected, of course, for obvious reasons. However, I shall read out his post. And he says, "Hey there, TB. As a GM who often listens to WoW Radio podcasts, I feel someone should at least provide a GM's viewpoint to the topic you brought up on the show last week. I'm not sure how sufficient it's going to be, since trying to explain this without being able to go into too much detail will be awkward at best, but I'll give it a try anyhow." He says this, "I wouldn't go as far as to consider the example you provided, D&T and Nihilum getting different responses regarding a despawning boss, to be a smoking gun, in order to prove there's a difference between how EU and US GMs deal with players. As far as I know, the difference only goes as far as a few specific cases where US and French laws require us to handle certain issues in a different fashion. Properly resetting any boss encounter isn't as simple as just flipping a button, no matter what any ex-GM says on the Something Awful forums. I haven't read the post, but someone who bears a grudge to his former employer to vent on those forums, well, you see where I'm going with this. And I somehow doubt that much of the content of his post is actually true, and I'm quite sure there's little of anything that he didn't present in the worst light possible. For example, as many Horde players can probably attest to right now, resetting the Showdown quest in the Blade's Edge Mountains isn't quite as simple as despawning Rexar after he gets his fat ass stuck in the environment again. I really wish it was, but it just isn't. If you ask me, and please note I'm not a specialist GM and I don't know exactly how the despawning boss issue was handled by either team, I'd say that the US specialists managed to find a way to reset the encounter and the EU ones didn't. Does this single example mean the EU specialists are worse by default than their US counterparts? I'd say no. And since the problem was hotfixed 2 days afterwards anyhow, it's probably a moot point. I agree it sucks Nihilum weren't able to try the boss that week, but we're not a hive mind. If the US team discovers something new, it's not instantly known by the EU team and vice versa. It takes some time to share the information. The above does prove, however, that Blizzard isn't totally oblivious to the pursuit of hardcore endgame content. Compare the handful of guilds that were affected by the boss despawning to all the players that get stuck in the Mechanar because the force field is closed, for example. It's merely a matter of the number of players affected. The Mechanar issue would be hotfixed, if it was really a matter of numbers, of course, rather than some despawning boss at the bottom of some really smelly cave that few have entered so far. Instead, GMs are assisting players who find themselves unable to complete the Mechanar until the gate is fixed in a future patch. As this, compared to resetting boss encounters, it's a relatively simple thing to do. I realise, perfectly, it's not possible to provide a flawless service all of the time. We are, contrary to popular belief, human after all. And I'm not going to deny some players have received rather dodgy answers to their GM tickets at times. But Blizzard isn't a static institution that doesn't listen to player concerns about GMs either. Your Did Your Pet Sell a Nefarian example must be a year old by now, and it's exactly something which would be dealt with and improved on internally. If players ever have a concern about how their ticket was handled, they have the option to email Blizzard about it, and in turn improve the service for the future. In closing, the majority of GMs actually do play WoW on a regular basis, and know enough about the content never to make mistakes like that, ever. I myself am part of a raiding guild and consider myself to be pretty knowledgeable about how the game works. I take pride in what I do for a living and try to assist players in the best, and to the best, of my ability. Even though I may just be another cog in the machine, I make sure that I keep spinning correctly at least and try to have those around me accomplish the same. Love your show, by the way, keep up the good work. That's from a certain anonymous GM on EU side. It's a very interesting point. I mean, the only thing which I would really disagree with in there is that the sharing of information between the two organisations is difficult. I really actually don't think it is. I mean, seriously, how difficult can it be? Surely you can flag up an issue like that. That's a pretty major issue. That's going to affect hardcore guilds, and they make a lot of noise about things like that. And, of course, endgame and world first are vitally important in the progression of the community and in the sense of WoW being a competitive game. So surely you could flag something like that up and communicate it over, but, well, if you're saying that, it's very interesting to get another perspective. We rarely, ever so rarely do, and it is nice to see. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you because it was very, very interesting, at least to me. Before going on to this week's
Second Wind!
Or was it last week's Second Win? It's kind of both, I suppose. It's the continuity between the shows. It's insane. So, Second Win. Last week, we asked you to come up with a little bit of a conclusion as regards to what exactly is happening with crafting. Is it just going around in a circle like it was last time? Is it completely worthless? Are there certain things which are imbalances compared to others? And I asked you to see if you could come up with some examples of that. Now, I'm an enchanter, and I'm a herbalist. Now, herbalism for me hasn't changed much. Herbalism is pretty much exactly the same as it was, as I would expect from gathering professions. Oh, I can skin certain mobs now. That's not really a biggie, especially bearing in mind you never got any skill ups from it, but of course I'm 375 now, so that doesn't make any difference to me. However, enchanting is, again, pretty much the same, but there are certain things that could have been done, like, for instance, the whole spell scroll idea of being able to sell an enchant on the auction house hasn't been implemented as yet. Oh no, there's supposedly plans for it, but there's been plans for it for ages. Where is it? Come on, it can't be that difficult. It would be nice to not have to stand there on Ogrimarsh at, or whatever the hell that bloody city is that I keep getting lost in. Shattrath, that's the one. It would be nice to be able to actually not have to stand around there for 3 hours in order to sell an enchant and then have some idiot claim that it should be free because he brought the mats and it only involves clicking one button. However, the rest of the professions are sort of a mystery to me. Back in the day, I used to be an engineer and a miner. Now, I dropped engineering because it was worthless, and at this point in time, the kind of agreement is that it's still worthless. Still, they haven't done anything with it whatsoever. It's a toy profession. That's all it is. so let's hear what you had to say about that. I got a load of emails about this, so I'm going to have to skip a few of them, I'm afraid. However, let's see what we got. Right. Hey, TB. I go by the name of Artemis, long-time listener and WoW player, fresh to level 60, long story. After listening to WoW Radio and Blue Plz since pre-BlizzCon, I decided I'd finally offer some participation. I believe that, in almost every MMO, crafting has always been overshadowed by raiding, PvP, and other forms of content. I believe that to balance out endgame versus crafting gear, Blizzard should be taking a look back to the pre-TBC raids in a way similar to your re-evaluation for gear for pre-TBC raids and instances. Certain bosses, such as Ragnaros, Nefarian, and Four Horsemen, etc., should have a chance to drop certain kinds of exact reagents. What these reagents would be used for would be scaling enchants that would have their bonuses scale with the player's levels, or use a percentile base for their effects. Another item type would be armor layers, or some kind of weapon enhancements as well. For example, say you're a blacksmith who goes down and kills Rag. You can manage to win a form of elemental essence that could be used one time on a weapon of your choice, and will give it perhaps a percentile-based fire damage proc. For another example, perhaps you just down Kel'Thuzad, he drops a form of ice element that could be applied to an armor or shield item to buff defense and ice resistance, or other various effects. These items could also be used in new crafting recipes, and older, less powerful ones from these pre-65 bans could be used in new lower-level recipes to add something else for lower-level crafters that might actually provide some items worth some use. Some idea I have comes from Star Wars Galaxies, actually. I think that perhaps in a form of getting a trade skill up in a less expensive manner would be to have scaling quality and resource costs. For example, you could smith a new chest plate, or you could create a dumbed-down version of the same chest plate with lesser stats, but also the requirements of the metal would be less as well. Just figured I would send you my thoughts. Sorry if the message is a bit long. If you could, since I can't make live show times of Blue, please don't ask you if you give a shout out to my old guild, Nox Invictus, on Proudmoore US. Right, interesting idea. I mean, the problem with having level-scaled enchants that drop off raid bosses is, well, what are you exactly going to do with that? The problem right now is that people, of course, don't go into those instances, and are not going to go into those instances unless there's a reason for it. You can't have something level-scaled because, well, everyone's 70, and 70's supposedly what matters in that sense, and with raiding, you don't exactly go raiding at level 50. It doesn't happen. But I do see the percentile-based thing is quite an interesting one. There's not a lot of percentile-based stuff in the game as regards to crafted items, which means, of course, the crafted items don't really scale very well. So that could be a little bit of an issue. I do like the whole armor levels and weapon enhancements as kind of unique enhancements that you could put in things. I mean, to be honest, it's interesting to see the whole idea of enhancing existing items being put into play. We've got stuff like that going on with blacksmithing at the moment, with the Fire Guard and the upgraded version of the Fire Guard, the Lionheart Blade, and all that kind of cool stuff. It's interesting to see that upgrades are becoming an issue, but they seem to be very, very limited. Those particularly are, of course, blacksmithing. The rest of the stuff, you know, you don't see engineering have that kind of option. You don't really see tailoring have that kind of option either. It's just blacksmithing, which is interesting because there's a definite disparity there. The lack of parallels, as it were. Let's see what else you had to say on this one. Plenty of emails on this one. Here we go. This is a nice one. So from Leatherworker, you see, this is the reason I asked for emails, of course. I've only played some of the professions up to 370. I haven't even got enchanting up to 375 yet. But there's some interesting perspectives from other people here. And he goes here. This is from Sean Nesworthy. He says, before I go into this is just about the leatherworking profession, as I'm not totally familiar with all professions. With leatherworking, from 0 to 300, it's been kept the same. The craftable gear isn't that useful until you start going past 300. Where, like the rest of the gear, it was buffed. This enabled leatherworkers to make items that were actually good for themselves and their bank. Now, this is my opinion, but what I've noticed when you reach 375 is that exactly the same thing's happened again. The craftable gear is not actually worth being crafted. And the reason is, well, he's got 3 reasons, in fact. The mats they actually cost, too expensive. The fact that better gear is easily acquirable in 5 mats, and the combination of the above 2. Yeah, you see, that makes sense to me. Now, leatherworking forks off into 3 classes. You've got your elemental leatherworking, your tribal leatherworking, and your dragon scale leatherworking. Now, here is the QQ part, as he says. Rogues, the stereotypical class that you're most likely to choose this profession on, have been kicked in the teeth because of the craftable epics you can get from it. Now, dragon scale, your craftable epic is a male item. It's male. So much for leatherworking, eh? Rogues wear leather. OMG. That's a surprise. Now, with Tribal, the end tradable epic has spell damage and healing and intellect and other druid stats on it. So it's pretty much Moonkin stuff. With Elemental, a Primal Strike set is most suitable for rogues, but the mats you need to craft it are, in his opinion, not worth acquiring for the stats you're going to get rid of. So here's the Primal Strike set requirements. 14 Primal Might, that's a huge amount. 3 Primal Nether, 18 Heavy Knothide Leather, and it has its total stats bonuses of 667 armor, 57 agility, 86 stamina, and 240 attack power, and plus 20 strength for the sec bonus. That is more based upon feral druids than it is for rogues. There's no sockets, no crit, no hit, no dodge or resilience. The fact that you can't even get as near, you can get near as good as this stuff from 5-mans makes the Primal Strike set useless for rogues, and even druids. The only people that could use this kind of thing are people who are guildless and go with pokes to everywhere. No offence, but if this is the way that all professions are going to be turning out to be, then Blizzard really needs to review their profession choices. That's from Bladescope from Access Denied. He's a level 70 Alliance Rogue on Venture Co. Very good point. Again, lack of thought being put into it. The really big problem you have with crafting right now is that if something is easier to get and doesn't cost you money, you're going to go for it. It means going in a 5-man. A 5-man, for the love of God. You can go into a 5-man and get better stuff than this Primal Strike set, and yet this Primal Strike set requires Primal Nether and Primal Might in large amounts. That's insane! You know what the really silly thing is? You're going to have to go into instances to get the Primal Nether in the first place, at which point you might end up getting drops that are better. They don't think this through. They never engaged their brains when it came down to this. I don't know what they were thinking, but you can see it all over the place. There's a massive disparity. Leatherworking, the stuff is rubbish, and yet with tailoring, you're getting items which are better than Karazhan gear. For the love of God, Spell Strike, Spell Fire, Frozen Shadow Weave. A lot of this stuff is better in elements than Tier 4 for certain specs, and it's... God Lord. Complete disparity. It's like they were worked on by separate teams and there was absolutely no whatsoever communication between them. Now what I'm going to say, just before I close, is what is required is a pass. They need to go through it all at the same time, take a pass and balance it. That's my opinion on that one. This is Blue Plz on WoW Radio. This is Dungeon Storm Chaser. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. You can listen in live on Sundays at 17:30 GMT. That's 12:30 Eastern Standard Time with a lively musical pre-show kicking off 1 hour beforehand. If you like WoW Radio's productions, then make sure to dig our shows at dig.com and check out our website at www.wcradio.com. Yo, folks, shuttle and so forth. It's time for yet another edition of the one and only Rap in the Forums, where we take forum posts, infuse them with hip-hop style, and see if they make any more sense than they originally did. Usually the answer is no, but we do it anyway. It's one from Wuta, from Senpai what the hell is that? I can't even pronounce the guild name. No one cares anyway. And it tells this thread, players are leaving now, the TBC or is gone. Yo. Okay. Let's go. It's a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. Hey y'all, this is not a whine, but just a report from a slightly troubled guild master. I am wondering if others see the same picture as I do right now. My guild is rather large, but very social. But before TBC and Loyalty, Teamplay were very good. We are a mixed guild, both casual, social, but also with hardcore and game raiding players. It is a difficult mix for a guild, but has worked great so far. Well, at least until now. When TBC came, almost everyone, 90% were thrilled. Everything was great, but by now we have 124 level 70s in a guild. But now something is feeling wrong, and quite a few oldies who were loyal members and happy endgame raiders are quitting. Wow, taking breaks and just going cold. Some of the reasons I am about to list are both explanations from my members and my own conclusions, but the only thing keeping a guild together, apart from the social aspect and loyalty, is that the guild has something to do together as a guild in-game, a common purpose for the guild members. In the old WoW, we all worked together, raiding 20 to 40-man instances. Teamwork was the challenge that people liked and fought for as a guild. Now when TBC came, all were happy because it's also fun to do individual tasks, but leveling to 70 was fun. For most, like a breath of fresh air. After 1.5 years buried in raid instances, and most people kept talking about the new 25-man instances that lie ahead of us. Those are the new endgame goals that will keep guilds together for at common goal to fight for. But no! Blizzard have made one mistake, and it is gonna cost them a lot of players, and yes, it is an endless line of grinding to get keys, then endless grinding to finish hero, then endless more to finally get access to the next instances. That is large enough to make a guild a goal. Don't get me wrong, I agree that every or most instances should demand some work to get into. But the problem here is that if you want to go XX, then you have to clear A, B, C, D, E, F. First is simply too much. It's too obvious that Blizzard thought, hey, TBC has to live for at least a year, and the old instances were too easy to break too fast. Let's take Karazhan. A cool instance, we are only missing the last boss, but oh well. At least 2 of our 4 to 6 steady teams are there, but Karazhan should never have been a must-clear to move on instance. It should be a standalone instance. This is the real problem in TBC. All the new major instances should be standalone. Every 25-man instance should be hard to get to, but a guild should not be forced to pass other instances to get there. They should go there themselves and discover if they are strong enough or need to go somewhere else first to train and gear up, and should not be forced to get revered rep with 5 factions or force a complete hero mode in XX instance. No, we should go to an instance and then conclude for ourselves that we are not ready for this. We should go gear up in XX instance instead and come back in 2 months. Many of you will say that it is working as intended. Maybe I like the idea that stream hardcore guilds or to get a challenge now, but I said that Blizz made a bad turn, chaining way too much access upon access together. They missed the message on the wall. Stop the forced grinding. Change to an alternative, but often needed. One of the great things in MMOs are that they get not liner spelled the first-person shooters, but TBC has too much of it. Before TBC, you had to do A, B, and C. Go get to D. Now players feel they have to do the entire alphabet, and many are choking on it and quitting. They don't leave my guild, they leave WoW. And it is so sad because WoW is a fantastic game and TBC is a great expansion in every other way. Just my 2 cents, I think many others can relate to this, and I hope something can be done about it in time. Best regards, Wooter, GM of Sampadanika on Ravencrest. This is a very special thank you to all of our iTunes listeners who continue to subscribe to our podcasts and download using the iTunes client. Did you know that you can in fact review and rate our podcasts using the iTunes client simply by going to the feeds page and writing yourself a review?
Show me what you've got!
This not only helps us to gather valuable feedback about our shows and improve the quality of our output,
show them no mercy,
but also provides us with the valuable promotion that we need to push the station to the next level.
I'm just getting warmed up.
So take a moment out of your day and rate and review us using iTunes. Thank you for your continued support.
The time for practice is over. Show me what you've learned.
Computer enhanced, digitally mastered, and completely downloadable. It's the really hyperactive and totally interactive WoW Radio. WCRadio.com.
Oh yes, the pain, suffering, and quite frankly inexcusable rap in the forums. Only here on WoW Radio. This is Blue Plz. This is TotalBiscuit. Oh yes. Unfortunately, we won't have us the Murloc this week because it won't export for no apparent reason. It's the curse of the Murloc. It's quite horrible, has to be said. Oh well, I'll try and get you a double bill next week and see what I can do. Right, okay. I have topics for this week, unsurprisingly. If you have any opinions on what's going on the show this week, themurloc@gmail.com is the place to email. That is themurloc@gmail.com. Right. Now, here's a question for you. Just how much do you seriously believe Blizz actually tests their own content? It's an interesting question. However, when you see multiple occurrences of high-end guilds banging their head against something which is quite frankly inconceivably impossible, what do you think? Do you think, oh, they just need to L2P, or do you think, they didn't really try this, did they? Now here's the concept for you. High-end guilds, are they actually being used as beta testers? And if so, just how acceptable is that? It's definitely an interesting question. You will find it. Now, let's take some examples. Let's go back in time. and find some examples. The first 2 bosses of Blackwing Lair when they were first released were in fact bugged and unbeatable. Here's another example. Cthulhu. Does anyone remember Cthulhu, the double I-beam of death that pretty much one-shots the entire raid? Or any other number of evil things. It happens. You get a boss that is too difficult. The reason it is too difficult is because it wasn't properly tested. At least that's all I can assume. I mean, surely they can't just put that in there just to slow people down. I mean, it's not even a case of being too difficult, it's a case of being impossible in many cases. It's like the double I-beam trick. That makes that absolutely, completely and totally impossible. We saw it happen, and it's happened with other bosses. Rag had the same issues, Nefarian had the same issues, multiple other bosses had the same issues. Now, apparently, Lady Vash has the same issue. A certain guild whose name I will not recount on air just yet is on Phase 3 of Lady Vash, and they found out something rather interesting. In Phase 3 of Lady Vash, 5 people in the raid are mind-controlled. They cannot be crowd-controlled in any way, shape or form. And their damage output is increased by 500%. This caused the raid to wipe in about 3 or 4 seconds. Now, let me just ask you how exactly you're supposed to deal with 5 mind-controlled, uncrowd-controllable players who have got 500% damage output and have just killed your entire raid like that. It's like Blackheart the Inciter on crack. It's horrific. Now, I can understand, yeah, that's a pretty cool idea, but when a fifth of your raid goes ballistic and does as much, if not more, damage than your entire raid put together, and it's directed at you, I mean, we're looking at one-shot situation there. Apparently, they're also uncounterspellable. So what happens if a mage decides to cast a fireball on someone? It's got 500% damage in that kind of gear. What's going to happen? Oh, yeah, you're dead. What happens if he decides to run into the middle of the raid, an arcane explosion or frosting over everyone down? What the hell's going to happen then? That's insane. Now, there is a term for this. It is rather rude, so I'm going to use the other term. Rooster block. Rooster block. Something which blocks someone deliberately from continuing within the content. Now, I'm sorry, but if Lady Vash is going to have that silliness attached to it, then there's got to be, what can you do against that? Theory craft it for me for a moment. Think through in your heads. You got a 25-man raid, just got through Phase 2 of Lady Vash, which is difficult enough as it is, and then has that happen to them. What are they supposed to do about that? Exactly. It's like, again, let's go back to an example. Blackheart the Inciter, not a particularly difficult fight, but annoyingly random. There's nothing you can do about that mind control. Nothing. It comes down to a matter of luck. See, last time I went on Blackheart the Inciter, he burnt my evocation when I was on full mana, and then spammed Flame Strike over again, and they burned 7k of my mana and my cooldown in one turn. Now, the last time, he just did nothing more than spam Ice Lance at somebody. Now, it's blindingly obvious that, that kind of random element is, while fun in a 5-man, ridiculous in a raid encounter. You can't control that kind of thing. And surely, raid encounters should be about the amount of control that you can exert over a particular encounter and the precision in which you execute a particular strategy. The more randomness you put into it, the more frustrated people are going to get. I mean, what happens when Lady Vash is on farm status, if anyone manages to beat him under those circumstances, which I highly doubt, although I could be sent to eat my words, you never know. People will always find a way. But what happens? Are we going to have something that can never be truly put on farm status just because it's got some cheap random element to it? That's rubbish. It really is. It's like people were saying Kel'Thuzad would never go on farm status because it was a little bit too random, but it didn't turn out to be that way. It'll be interesting to see if Lady Vash ends up being that way. And I say, that is, from what I have heard, how the third phase of Lady Vash goes. At least as far as people managed to get into it. They died within a matter of seconds, not entirely surprisingly. You can't crowd control the people in any way, shape or form. What are you supposed to do? There may be a trick to it, perhaps. But then again, it may also be an absolute, complete, total cockblock. Yes, I just said it. Rooster block. So, let's take a few other examples of untested stuff. Did you know, this is the information that I've been given, that during beta, Gruul was never downed. This is the information I've been given. Gruul was never downed. Now, did you also know that Gruul's hit points have been doubled since beta? Now, you've got something which has never been downed in beta, yet you are then giving it a static 100% increase in hit points and expecting it to be balanced. Now, I'm not saying Gruul is too difficult, nor am I saying Gruul is too easy, because I haven't done him yet. But it does seem to me very bad form that you would ever do such a massive leap and a massive change without thoroughly testing the consequences. Now, a lot of people are having trouble with Gruul. I've been told that the Uber guilds are having trouble with Gruul after certain hot fixes, quote-unquote. Gruul is kicking the snot out of people on a regular basis. Now, it's interesting to note the comments that were made by Zarek a few weeks ago that Gruul and Magtheridon are apparently too hard. And as such, they would be nerfing him down to a kind of a Nixia level. Which is, okay, fair enough. If you're going to argue that, that's fair enough. But just how tested is this going to be? And are they using, again, high-end guilds for testing purposes? It's pretty ridiculous, in my honest opinion, that they can't internally test this kind of thing. Now, why can't they internally test it? Is it because their 25-man testing team isn't good enough? If they knew the encounter back to front, then surely they'd be able to take it down. If they know everything that's going to happen and when it's going to happen. There is a degree of precision involved, but then again, you're looking at people who are employees of Blizzard. Supposedly, they should be able to deal with this kind of thing. It's a very interesting thing to see. And to note, of course, that this has been happening in the past. That people have come up, especially Uber guilds, have come up against something. You know, say, Nihilum coming up against Cthulhu is a very good example. Cthulhu got fixed, as in Cthulhu was broken. Why was he broken? Because he was double eye beaming. And that kills pretty much anybody. Nature resistance, port or otherwise. You can't do anything against that, and it's very, very random. You can't stop it. Again, random element in there. Now they changed that, and then suddenly people could down him. It didn't make him easy, it made him attainable, it made him possible. And there's a certain balance to be found there, and that's fine. I completely accept that. That there is a balance to be found between too easy and too difficult, and it's very difficult to walk that line. But it does seem to me that there's a completely inadequate amount of testing going on with certain encounters. In the sense of you're having changes which are apparently ill thought out, that have simply been thrown in there by looking at a spreadsheet rather than actually trying the encounter out. Again, I cite my example. Double hit points on Gruul. Why exactly was Gruul's hit points doubled like that? Why? And why, you know, was it tested? Unlikely. Very, very unlikely indeed, it has to be said. It's bizarre. Really bizarre right now. So yeah, I do find it somewhat interesting to note that this seems to be the way that things are going. It doesn't bode well, it has to be said, for future content, but then I suppose you could argue if you're going to release a large amount of content at once, then internal testing might not quite be as good as it should be. If you look at the Black Temple, for instance, I would hope that the Black Temple is tested to the point of not being full of bugs and not being too tricky. You know, I want to be able to see evidence that a 25-man team within Blizzard themselves have actually cleared the encounter. Now, if that's the case, then cool. Because if people are wiping on it over and over again for various reasons, and that's just because they just haven't got their head around the encounter, then that's fine, because that's the way things should be. But, if a 25-man testing team can't kill it, then what on earth? You know, how's that supposed to work? So I can't say that I'm 100% impressed by that. This is something that Blizzard really have to watch out for, because of course, this kind of goes in a parallel with the thing that we were saying last week about difficulty, and that Blizzard really have to be very careful with their endgame content, because the endgame content is the main meat of the game. And if the main meat of the game has issues with it, then the game has issues with it, quite serious issues in fact. And that's not a very healthy way to be. Not whatsoever. Now, you cannot then go on and make the excuse, oh, well, it's okay to have high-end guilds for testing, because no one else is getting in there, therefore it's a minor issue. We'll have it fixed by the time the majority get in there. Not the real way to do things, is it? To be quite honest. Now, if people have fought, and people have spent a lot of time getting into that end of end, you know, the cream of the crop of the end game, They should not have to deal with this kind of rubbish. They really shouldn't. We've got despawning problems. The lurker below was despawning all over the place. We had Kel'Thuzad despawning. It's like, surely that's something they could test. I mean, come on. Now, people might argue, well, you don't understand the server architecture. Yeah, you're right. I don't necessarily understand the server architecture. But is it entirely inconceivable to set up something on a live server? On a semi-live server? You know, the public test realm. What the heck is the public test realm for God's sake? Surely that's an emulation of a live server. It surely is structured in the same way. If despawning issues are a result of bad server hardware and netcode issues, then you've got a game, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game with serious netcode issues and server problems. Now, that says to me that someone didn't do their homework. That's a very bad thing. Now, I can understand that every single little flaw may not be found. Okay, fine. So every single little flaw is not going to be found. Big deal. But the boss should be killable, let's face it. It should be killable, and you really shouldn't be exploiting endgame kill stats to do that. Now, I've had a couple of interesting emails from various people. Tyker's emailed in saying, there might be a reason that Vash is unbeatable. As of now, there hasn't been any speech from Mount Hayal. So if you were to kill Vash, you would at least get one vial for the Hayal prequest, and since Hayal isn't implemented yet, at least so I've heard about it, you may not be able to kill her yet. I know it's a weird idea, but with Blizzard you never know. Now, again, that comes back to the idea of rooster block, of putting something deliberately in the way to stop people from progressing. So, I don't know if Hayal has finished yet. I have no idea. But I can't see anyone down in Kael'thas anytime soon either. This is not an excuse, to be quite honest, in my honest opinion. The way that things should be designed is they should be difficult and challenging. Now, you need to take your highest common denominator and make it challenging for them, let them beat it, and let other people work their way up to it. And it may take them a year to do it. And is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. They've got something to aim for. But again, you've got to make sure that it's beatable. And you can't have stuff like that as an excuse. Really, really you can't. Okay, so you've done the Hayal prequest. Oh yeah, we've got to enable, actually put Hayal into the game. Sorry about that. Dear Lord. Sorry, I don't know if it's in the game already. I have no clue whatsoever, obviously. But if it is, then you would have thought it would already be ready, because anything that's reliant on doing something else to get into it should be ready. It's like, say, the Black Temple. Black Temple isn't in there yet. There's no pre-quest for it. There's no attunement for it in the game right now, which means, of course, that no one's expecting to get into it. There's an expectation that if you've done an attunement, then you're actually going to get into this blinking instance. You know. It's tricky. It's tricky to even conceive that anyone would actually design something this way. Now, I don't know if this is the way that it's done, but it's certainly the impression that's being given, and that's a very unhealthy impression to give, because, of course, your hardcore guilds are at the top, other people look up to them. They do. If they quit, it has a major impact on the communities. And if they feel like they're being used as glorified beta testers, then they're gonna get really, really annoyed. I already know this is happening with certain Uber guilds regarding certain encounters, whose names I will not mention, but yeah, it's happening. And I can't imagine they're particularly pleased about that, to be quite honest. Any opinions on this? Email themurloc@gmail.com. When I come after the break, I'm going to delve into something rather intriguing and complex. And it's going to be a comparison. Why do we still play WoW, and what would it take to actually develop something that was better? A WoW beta. You're listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit. I'm not even going to announce the name of this track. You should recognise it immediately as the pure cheese that it is. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. You can listen in live on Sundays at 17:30 GMT. That's 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, with a lively musical pre-show kicking off 1 hour beforehand. If you like WoW Radio's productions, then make sure to dig our shows at dig.com and check out our website at www.wcradio.com.
Primed for action. Torqued to the breaking point. And fueled by 3 gallons of Noggin Fogger Elixir. This is WoW Radio.
Yes, indeed, the sounds of White Lion with Transformers. There was absolutely no reason not to play that track, at least not that I can come up with anyway. It's cold in here. I'm mildly dehydrating, but I'm fine. Honest, I'm not going to collapse in a heap. This is Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit. Right. Okay. An interesting topic, a topic of some debate and some consternation, as it were. Now, why still play WoW? Why do we still play WoW? It's an interesting question. Now, the question is, more specifically, why do we play WoW as opposed to other games? I mean, here's an example. Recently, the staff have been playing EVE Online, okay? I'm not into that. I don't like EVE Online for various reasons. I think it's pretty much a glorified spreadsheet, which is the opinion of several people, quite frankly. I think the requirements to get into it are too high, in the sense that it's too goddamn difficult and daunting for newer players. I believe that some people have got themselves into such an unattainably high state, and bearing in mind that it is something of a PvP-orientated game rather than PvE, that they are inconceivably, impossibly difficult to kill, and therefore have free reign. And that's always a bad thing. It's the same concept that breaks stuff like Archlord. Like, ooh, there's an Archlord, and now he kills everybody. Good game. Well, I like to do something of a comparison between the two, and try and work out exactly why people are playing WoW as opposed to EVE Online. Let's face it, EVE has some pretty good things going for it. Let's do some comparisons, shall we? Okay. Here's a start. The PvE aspect. Now, there is not a massive amount of PvE content within EVE Online. It's mainly PvP. It's a lot of... what's the way to put it? It's player-orientated, player-created content. Now, you look at that, and then you compare it to, say, WoW. WoW is primarily a PvE game, as opposed to a PvP one. The actual player interaction as such is very, very minimal. It's, again, the essence of PvE, player versus environment. You could even have a game where no violence was committed between players and players, and you could still have a player versus player game. It's like saying a stock market challenge game would not be a player versus player game. Of course it is. If you're going up against other players, it doesn't matter if you're not shooting them out of the sky with a missile. It's still player versus player. Now here, it's player versus environment. It pretty much is all the way through. PvP is a mild distraction from the primary aim of the game, which is PvE. In leveling, you are going up against the environment. You are questing. You do not level up by PvP. Okay? That's a pretty obvious statement, but again, it just emphasizes the point. Now, in EVE, it's completely different. You are dealing with a player-run market. You are dealing with even player-run sectors. And you're dealing with the idea that someone can come along, blow you up, and you will have a significant penalty for it. Significant penalty. Now, if someone kills you here, all you've got is an issue of time. It's a little bit different in EVE. So, let's segue on to PvP. Now, I'm going to say EVE has significantly better PvP. Why? Because it's a PvP-orientated game. Let's look at the way that PvP actually works in that. You can pretty much shoot at anybody. Except in certain sectors, if I remember correctly. I didn't play much of EVE, but I did go and research a few things. You can shoot at people, and you can kill them. Not only can you kill them, but you can what's called pod them. You can blow up their escape pod, which will kill their character, and of course blow up their ship. Now, you can clone your character. You can buy a clone, which is certainly a very good idea. If you don't buy a clone, you lose, I believe, all the skills you were getting, or something along those lines. And of course you lose, if you die, you lose your implants, which are basically upgrades to your character stats. You've got group-based PvP, particularly in that. Fleet actions. The big fleets have things called Titans, these huge, huge spaceships, and various other things, battle cruisers, frigates, destroyers, all that kind of good stuff. And it's based pretty much around fleet action. Which is fair enough, because that's how you'd expect a space-based game to be. Now, WoW is again based on group PvP. But the problem is, it's meaningless. Arenas do not make for meaningful storyline-based PvP, whereas the storyline in EVE is often pretty much player-created, in the sense that you've got corporation versus corporation, whereas in a guild versus guild environment within WoW, it doesn't really work so well. What are you going to do? Corpse camp them? Oh no, there's a war! It doesn't affect anything. I can just hide in an instance. Yeah, it doesn't make any blind bit of difference. Now, I was reading a rather interesting review of a ex-WoW player, and he was playing EVE Online. And he was arguing that EVE Online had much more to offer in terms of gameplay and opportunity. EVE has a true economy, for instance, which is okay, fair enough, if you like that. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that if you have a true economy, you get to the stage of some players being so unbelievably powerful that, again, you just can't do anything to them. EVE is based around... It's a capitalist simulator. It's probably fair to say, actually, that WoW is a socialist game, in the sense of that there's a lot of safety nets for people. There's a minimum standard, whereas in EVE, it's a capitalist game. People can advance so far that they are completely and totally untouchable. Now that, in my opinion, is a problem. While that is attractive to certain hardcore types, it's very niche. Exceedingly niche. It's also not an easy game to get into, necessarily. Now, let's have a look at some other elements of EVE. EVE, for instance, has no levels. It's a non-linear character progression system. I do think, to be quite honest, that as a result, it suffers greatly in comparison to WoW. Now, levels have been in RPGs for a very, very, very long time. They are a static and a particularly good mechanism, in my honest opinion, of showing a way of quantifying your character as regards to its progression. My character is level 12, yours is level 10, I progressed more than you, ha ha ha. You know, that kind of thing. That's good. Because players often need, little markers. This is the watermark that I need to attain. Am I lower or higher than the watermark? Am I drowning in a sea of complete mediocrity? Or am I soaring slightly above the level of mediocrity? That's a question. And it's a good question. What's happening with it? Now, EVE's system is not based around that. Their character progression system is based around a couple of things. How much you've trained your character, as in what skills you know, and what ship you're flying. And, of course, how much money you have. As a capitalist MMO, it's based primarily around how much money you've got. Like, for instance, you can do quests, quote-unquote, jobs, as it were. And if you do a certain number of jobs, you have a chance of gaining enough reputation with a particular organisation to say, well, we will allow you to build a ship or acquire this weapon for cut price. Now, this is not necessarily, by any stretch of the imagination, something unique. It's not like in WoW, where rep gain means you can acquire something. It's static. When you reach revered with Cenarian Circle, you get X, Y, and Z. It doesn't work that way in EVE. The thing with it is that what you get given is something you can acquire anyway. Which means that you can quantify character progression specifically down to skill points and money. Now, that to me just seems a little bit stale. Some people would argue, well, it's more free-form, but just how free-form do you really want to get? The success of WoW, in my honest opinion, was because it was based on the principles of an RPG. Old school. But it took a refreshing look at it and made it accessible for people. And that's a good thing. Now, EVE has a market. There's no two ways about that. Absolutely. I'm not going to dispute that it has a market. And it's got various good elements to it. Like, for instance, the universe. You can have 30,000 plus people online at any given time. Whereas on a server, in WoW, you'll have a few thousand. That is a plus to some degree, but it's also a minus. It makes you, who are you within your own community? You can be an absolute nobody, and you may maintain that position of being an absolute nobody for a very long time. Forging your identity within WoW is significantly easier, at least within your own community. Forging it within the wider community, that's difficult. But, it's supposed to be. And I think there's something more of a community aspect to servers within WoW, these micro-communities. Something that I don't believe EVE actually shares. Now, there's a whole list of things which he claims, EVE is better than WoW, WoW is better than EVE, blah, blah, blah. Now, he says the single most important thing, which is never stated in reviews, is that in EVE Online you can be really evil, and people can be really evil back to you. You can be destroyed and even betrayed. In WoW, being evil is much more of a fashion statement. Okay, fair enough. However, you've got to bear in mind, of course, that you are, again, playing a game. Now, look at the people that play WoW. You've got people from all walks of life play WoW. People from all walks of life do not play EVE Online. Why? Because EVE Online can be a pain in the ass. Just like any other game where you can have death penalties, you can have people who are ludicrously more powerful than you completely destroy a significant amount of progress that you've made in the game just because they feel like a bastard today. That's actually not a good thing. If it were, say, a hardcore simulator designed for hardcore people, which in my opinion it is, it's designed for a certain crowd. Yes, in that sense, it's great. It's like Diablo 2 hardcore mode. It's like no one in their right mind, unless they want a really hardcore experience, just plays hardcore mode. It's labelled hardcore for a reason, but it's optional. Now, EVE does not have that. You can still have this happening, and it can make people damn miserable. Yeah, the loss of virtual property. We've seen stories about people getting so upset that they've gone and hurt people over it, or sued people, or done various other things. It's still something that you have gained, and to lose it is not a good thing at all. Now, he's arguing, this guy that's done this review, is arguing that this is a good thing about EVE. I argue that it is not. I argue that WoW actually has a significant leg up on that, because it is just a friendlier gaming experience. You know, when I lose in a single-player game, that's fine. I don't really lose anything as such, I just reload. If I were to lose something in EVE, I can't reload. It's going to take me a significant amount of time to earn that back. And again, it's a richer get richer, poor get poorer scenario. Bad. Yeah, it's based on capitalism, which is the problem. The whole thing is damn capitalist. And if you are a capitalist with that kind of mind, you'll have fun with EVE Online. But if you're not, then what the heck are you going to do? Now, he also argues some various other things. EVE Online gives you a greater adrenaline rush. Okay, yeah. Getting killed in EVE, PvP is more thrilling because there's more at stake. But just how far do you go? I get an adrenaline rush out of PvP right now because I don't want to lose to people. It's my personal pride. I don't want to get killed. A loss of time is quite enough. Loss of possession, say if I lost gold and all that. I used to play some hardcore MUDs in the day. I used to play Moon, which you could lose levels and you could lose all your equipment and your gold. You really could. Heck, someone could kill you, steal everything, take your body halfway across the map and bury it. And you couldn't find it ever again. You'd have lost everything. Except for your experience, of course. Now that's pretty damn hardcore. And I lost an awful lot with that. It's actually the reason that I quit the game, because I just couldn't deal with that. The kind of people that played were like Norwegians that sat there 20 hours a day. Now that's fine if you're aiming for that kind of market, but EVE will never ever surpass WoW. Ever. Why will it never surpass WoW? Because it's aimed at a specific kind of market. Which has been the problem with many other MMOs, to be quite honest. Now, he also argues that EVE Online is not so time-consuming to progress. Okay, because you can train your skills offline. Okay, fair enough. Except for the fact that when you lose everything, it's damn time-consuming to get everything back. Once you've attained something within WoW, it stays there. It's pretty much a permanent fixture of your character until you, or a hacker, decides to get rid of it. That's a personal choice there. Now, someone in a bigger ship than you can decide that they want to get rid of your ship. They want to pod you. Now, yeah, you can insure yourself. That's cool, you can clone yourself. But again, what happens if that person goes on hunting for you and kills you again and again and again? You run out of money, you get, wiped down, back to square one. It is possible. It can be done. And that's a really bad thing, in my honest opinion. Now, yeah, the thing is, with WoW, it can be time-consuming. Getting rank 14 PvP, time-consuming. Doing the raiding, time-consuming. But it's optional. There are things you can do. The problem with EVE is that, well, what is there to do, really? Aside from going for this, hey, let's go and own my own sector. Let's have a big corp alliance. Let's own the biggest ship. You don't really get thrilled, at least too much, in my honest opinion, of acquiring, oh, I got a frigate today. Good game. I've just got to blow your frigate out of the water with one missile. Now you don't have a frigate. In my opinion, that's not a great way to win a game. At least if you're trying to appeal to the masses. Now, yeah, WoW has mass appeal. Some people can argue that's a bad thing, because popularity, of course, does not necessarily mean that something is good. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad either. You can't simply say, well, that's popular, therefore the underdog's clearly better. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But again, you're missing the point. You're missing the one thing that makes WoW more accessible, and why people stay with WoW is because you can play it and not have to worry about that kind of thing. It's not aimed at a hardcore market. That's its success. But it has hardcore elements within it. They've built hardcore elements into the game, and that's something you can do. So you start off from square one, and you're not in an incredibly hostile world by any stretch of the imagination. Now, some people might call that Care Bear, but you know what? When I get home for a 40-hour week, I want to sit down and be able to play and not be worried that I'm going to lose all of my gear to some 14-year-old snot-nosed whelp who's had a bad day at school. Which is, in my opinion, why WoW is far superior to EVE. You're listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit. Here's a little bit of Nubcake news for you. Enjoy. Nubcake news! Stop that. Welcome to this week's edition of Nubcake News. Coming up later in the program, we discuss the merits of Badger Power, the new environmentally friendly but rather grumpy and prone to fleas power source for the world. Plus an exclusive look into the life and times of Gammon. Just why is he so sad? But first, recent reports by the world's leading scientists have confirmed that there is in fact nobody playing WoW anymore. The shocking failure of the Burning Crusade to sell any more than 27 copies worldwide has prompted such a severe downturn in players that many servers lie empty and dormant, and the surviving servers also lie empty and dormant because nobody is playing anymore. What? We're expecting some kind of dramatic revival? No, everyone is dead. Everyone is dead, Dave. This sudden exodus has caused a huge impact on the global economy. Sales of Mountain Dew and Hot Pockets have plummeted, making displaced workers resort to cannibalism, which they curiously found tastier than Hot Pockets. The once powerhouse economy of China has unprecedentedly imploded, leaving approximately 50 million gold farmers out on the streets, kicking their heels and lagging messily all over the place. The website eBay has issued a statement blaming Blizzard's failures for a sudden downturn in business and asking golden account sellers to come back please, all is forgiven, honest. And what of the players? Economists were surprised to find that there were suddenly absolutely no jobs anywhere on the planet. Investigators found entire companies now staffed with ex-WoW players communicating entirely in a bizarre lingo. Stock markets were in upheaval as the Dow Jones Index was flooded with requests which read WTB Goldplx and WTS 70 Rogue, lease gear named Pure Cold Killer, PvP server. Governments the world over are in panic and called on the services of the A-Team to assist them in their plight. Sadly, the A-Team doesn't in fact exist, so they instead turn to a slightly more sensible source, game designers, who they have tasked with designing a brand new MMO to accept those errant WoW players who they state are still on our jobs and white women. The development of this is shrouded in secrecy, but nothing is outside the reach of Nubcake News. Posing as a pleasing but forgettable potted plant, our inside man is, well, inside, with this exclusive design meeting. I call to order the first meeting of this, the ultimate gathering of MMO developers. We have designers from such greats as Dark and Light, Planetside Core Combat, and Fangtooth from the now defunct World of Warcraft.
Fangtooth, he was a designer?
Why, yes, he was responsible for the Aldor lift. I heard the giggles whenever someone falls down. Now, we must look at the reasons as to why WoW failed so badly before we can possibly design a WoW beater.
Indeed. Let's look at the facts. Blizzard introduced an expansion with brand new content, amazing new zones, better quest lines, thousands of new items, new instances, raid encounters, meaningful PvP, and flying mounts.
Yes, they did, and that's why it failed.
I'm not following your logic, sir.
People don't want these kind of things. They need something with panache, something with feeling.
I think I understand where you're coming from. You're basically saying that the new content was nothing more than reskinned rehashes of something that was already in the game and lacks...
No, don't be ridiculous. If it were that, then surely it would have succeeded. No, we need to look at the few elements that made WoW feel alive.
Meaningless world PvP, laggy events, frequent downtime...
No, Hogger!
Hogger?
May I present, ladies and gentlemen, the wave of the future, Hogger, the MMO.
Hogger?
Of course, what a fabulous character to build an MMO around. We see all of these surefire failures in development, such as Warhammer, World of Darkness, Firefly, all useless licenses with no flavour, guaranteed flops. But with Hogger, we can recapture the essence of the MMO.
You're going to have to enlighten me, sir. I don't really understand how Hogger could be developed into an entire game.
Oh, it's quite simple. When players roll their characters in World of Hogger, they get a broad choice of character classes.
So we're going to vary somewhat from the old mage, priest, warrior generic slots towards something a little bit more adventurous?
Absolutely. I've developed concepts for 4 primary classes. Angry Hogger, Sad Hogger, Happy Hogger, and Amused Hogger.
Aren't those simply emotional states of the same character?
Didn't you hear what I said earlier? We need panache, we need feeling, we need soul, emotion, we need to cover all possible facets in World of Hogger.
Well, I do see your point. How is character customization going to work?
Hats.
Hats?
Of course! We couldn't in all good conscience change the essence of the Hogger character, it's simply too perfect. However, we will allow players to wear different coloured and styled hats to denote individuality.
Yes. Character distinction and individuality are important. They allow players to find an essence of self.
Which is exactly why all of our players will belong to the Hogger Collective, a sort of hive mind, if you will.
Surely that would have a negative impact on the community.
Nonsense! The hive mind is perfect and will not allow such thoughts to even enter the minds of players. Now tell me, in your opinion, why did WoW initially succeed?
Accessibility, learning curve, distinctive visual styles, strong background lore, a successful franchise, lack of frustration and death penalties. Sir, this is going to be tough to emulate.
Exactly, which is why we're not going to.
Are you suggesting we innovate?
Language! Didn't your mother ever teach you manners? You will not use that word in this place again. No, no, no. We must instead take everything that made WoW bad and combine it together to form one glorious whole. It's elementary mathematics. A negative multiplied by a negative always equals a positive.
So what you're saying is we need to base World of Hogger entirely on elementary mathematics.
Exactly. Players must solve basic mental arithmetic in order to progress. There will be no mobs within the game, since no one can stand against the might of Hogger, and anyone bringing harm to the Hogger will result in ritual cleansing with fire.
I see the logic behind this. So which elements of WoW will we be incorporating into this new MMO?
Meeting stones in their original formats. They were ruined in the Burning Crusade by a foolish design decision that made them remotely useful. This is unacceptable. By combining meeting stones with the other negative aspect of WoW, Alderman, we can form an MMO for the ages.
I see. So if we were, for instance, to base the entire MMO inside Alderman...
Brilliant! It cannot fail. So here is our design document. Players roll their Hogger and set out into the confusing and deliberately convoluted and frustrating world of Alderman in search of meeting stones, which they must acquire via the use of basic arithmetic. Along the way, they meet other Hoggers who look disturbingly similar, save for different coloured hats.
But what about endgame?
This is the ultimate reason as to WoW failed in the first place. Endgame is far too depressing. The name implies that there is an end. MMOs cannot have an end. It is inconceivable. Therefore, we shall rename Endgame
to what?
Hello Kitty Adventure Island.
Now, what exactly is the logic behind that decision?
Logic is far too depressing. We should be replacing it with Hello Kitty Adventure Island.
Suddenly it all makes sense. Call the world president. We have his MMO ready.
The president has been replaced with Hello Kitty Adventure Island. Thank the Lord in heaven we are saved from this horrible situation of employed gamers and China actually having to make itself useful for a change. And here I thought this world was going to implode. This has been No Cake News. Good night. You're listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. You can listen in live on Sundays at 17:30 GMT. That's 12:30 Eastern Standard Time with a lively musical pre-show kicking off 1 hour beforehand. If you like WoW Radio's productions, then make sure to dig our shows at dig.com and check out our website at www.wcradio.com.
Fully licensed and stamped approved by the Cenarian Circle Women's Auxiliary. You're listening to WoW Radio.
Oh, yes! The sounds of Weird Al Yankovic, Angry White Boy Polka. Here on WoW Radio, this is Blue Plz with myself, TotalBiscuit. You just heard the sounds of Nubcake News. If you missed any of this show, and woe betide that you did, because my heart will fall out and perhaps wither and die on the floor, and I may go and write poetry and knit cardigans. Unlikely, but it could happen. Then you can listen to the archive. Oh yes, the archives. Go to the archives, wcradio.com, go to the downloads page. All of our shows are there, every single last one of them. Days, weeks of things to listen to. It's insane. Now, while we have something of a peak listenership, let me let you know about certain things that are happening. On the 25th of March, that is next week, directly after Blue Plz, I will be interviewing Nihilum. Oh yes, the mighty Uber Guild, that is what many would consider the #1 guild in the world. Although Death and Taxes might have something to agree with that, and if Death and Taxes would like an interview, just let me know, themurloc@gmail.com, of course. So yeah, you'll be able to tune in to the Nihilum interview, and it shall be most epic. You can submit your questions on wcradio.com on the forums, just register yourself up for that one. And just a quick reminder, since we've got loads of listeners, money! Give us lots of money. Wow Radio currently survives on donations! Yes, we do. We run everything on donations, and it's most awesome, and we love you for it. So if you have any spare change knocking around in your PayPal account, click the donate button. Oh yeah. So now that I've frustrated myself out in a overly commercial style fashion, it's time to get on to our last topic for the day, which is...
Second wind.
For next week. At least it will be after I've roid out a couple of these emails. Well, some very interesting emails as it happens. Now, here's a few emails. Oh, good lord, that's long. I'm going to avoid that one. Let's do something that's not so long. Right. Here's one from... let's see. Hysterica. Right. Hardcore raiders are the small minority of WoW, and even though the CMs may care about keeping them happy, the bean counters are Vivendi. And they run things, and to be quite honest, they do not care if you can Mortal Strike for 20,000. You'll notice the Fireman instances and heroics are almost flawless. This is for a reason. Keep the masses playing for as long as possible. The large majority of WoW players have not heard of D&T, etc., and are not interested more than seeing the occasional shiny items. Lady Vash equals Rathe Council. Any long-term MMO raider will understand this instantly. Yeah, I mean, I can see that point. But I would disagree with the fact that most people don't know who D&T are. There are two kinds of players, yeah? There are those within the community and those who are not in the community. Now, those within the community, of course, are the numbers, yeah? They're the numbers, which means that, of course, the money comes raking in every month. But the people that are part of the community, in my opinion, are what makes WoW worth playing. WoW is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kept going by its community. Communities exist everywhere, within guilds, within servers, within forums. Everywhere. Within WoW Radio itself has its own community. Communities are a very important element to MMOs, and if they do not persist, then horrible things will happen. Horrible. So yeah, while I agree with the small minority, you've got to bear in mind that you do need to keep that small minority happy because they are looked up to. Now, here's one for you. This is an interesting one. Heath comes up with this. Heath's been giving some very good emails over the past couple of weeks. I like Heath. And he says this. Under the BlizzCon section in the Burning Crusade Collector's Edition DVD, which I sadly have not had the chance to watch yet, and the Raiding Development interview, Blizzard crew joke of the dev team not being able to raid at the same level of real guilds because they don't have the same drive as players for guild and such. And I quote, "People underestimate the drive of loot in the success of your raid, and they talk about how much they wipe and fail at working on the encounters that they themselves created. But then on the other hand, this got me thinking. They also say, a lot of us, however, are in very high-end guilds. Is there a reason for it? Let's face it. 2 guilds being so far ahead. Would it be that wrong to ponder that perhaps D&T could have unmarked Blizzard workers in their ranks? Let's face it, if you made the game, you could quite easily be the best in it as a player. And by being one of the best, you could assess, you could basically do an assessment as regards to betering the content. Who were the Blizzard workers working overtime over the weekend to respawn Kel'Thuzad? Were they actually D&T members? Conspiracy, but honestly, who wouldn't do it? Yeah, I mean, I think that's overreaching somewhat. Yeah, it might happen, but that's certainly overreaching. It's a little bit paranoid. I can understand. But it does seem to me, again, lack of internal testing is a big killer. And it is funny that the drive for loot. Okay, the drive for loot. Well, what about the ability to know exactly what a boss is going to do at any given time because you wrote the damn encounter? Surely that would make it a little bit easier. Anyway, we continue. This is one Vorkada, also known as Wolforce. Hey, TV. If you think about it in a logical sense, Blizzard don't like players progressing faster than intended. If your guild flies through Molten Core, something is wrong. But much is the same for the other side. If your guild hits a wall of a boss, something is wrong. Nothing should be unbeatable. Karazhan needs attunement, people did it. Molten Core was hard, but people did it. The challenges are there to be knocked down. I see Blizzard more than willing to outright stop progression so that the world-first mentality people... sorry, I don't really understand what this actually says. Yeah, they see a problem, basically. If a no-name guild beats, say, Kael'thas before the big names, that's an issue. They know it will cause anger, but Blizzard haven't exactly cared about angering players for the sake of balance. So, what she's basically trying to say there is, I think, I'm sorry, I'm sort of very delusional for lack of water, and I'm probably going to collapse very, very soon. What she's basically trying to say is that Blizzard don't really care as to whether the big names get the world first or some random group, and they're more than willing, apparently, to put a block in the way, and then suddenly hotfix it, and then, woo, who gets there? And basically what he's saying there is, Blizzard simply want the world to be fair, and it's forcing others to suffer in the way of it. An interesting way of looking at things, personally not a opinion that I would share. But it's certainly interesting. That's what it's about that. Now, I've got my second win topic for the end of the show.
Second win!
And oddly enough, I've already got an email in about it before I even gave it, which is very, very scary. I am frightened, very much so, by this. So, the second win topic for this week. If you had to design a World of Warcraft beating game, how would you do it? This should get you guys thinking. Always get some interesting responses to that. How would you do it? How do you beat WoW? We already discussed in the previous section the comparison between another relatively popular MMO, EVE Online, and World of Warcraft. How, bearing in mind the reason why EVE Online is never going to beat World of Warcraft, because it appeals to completely the wrong market, how can you beat WoW? How can you beat it? How can you be as successful? Now, oddly enough, I've already had a response to this. This is rather scary. So, Jamie Sperry, please put the far-seeing away for 1 second. Right, and he says this. Here's something to get you guys started on this one. And, of course, you will have until next week to email in your responses to Second Wind. Just topic them Second Wind and send them to themurloc@gmail.com. I fear my voice is going. Oh, dear. I might have to change the synthesizer later on. Yes. Right. Yes, the bear is angry, folks. Right, here we go. Alright, this, whilst listening to you, so points may be repeated. This is something I have been thinking about for a while. The three main games in WoW are leveling, endgame PvE, and PvP. And, of course, more minor element in the metagame of RP. All of these things are covered in most MMOs. What WoW did is to take all the good points of all MMOs out and put them into one game. WoW has a good leveling system. It's not hard to level, and if you die, you don't lose anything. Only a bit of money on armor repairs and, of course, time. WoW also has a good endgame PvE, and that's being demonstrated right now. It has relatively good PvP as well. However, it's not as good as it could be. The RP can't be controlled so much by Blizzard, but they don't cater a huge amount to it anyway. What's to stop another game from coming along and copying WoW and improving upon it? To do this, a game dev would have to take the endgame PvE and the leveling system and maybe add some more content for both. Maybe leveling a bit more. Some more leveling. I wouldn't so much agree with that, but, let's roll with this. After this, you should take the PvP and improve upon it greatly. Maybe you should do RP and improve what Blizzard's done. This would not necessarily be needed. After this, you'd want to add something else to the game. Take a minor example, player housing. If they did it properly, they could have a system that would let you show off your house. And adding trophies to show off your achievements, all this kind of good stuff. Or as a bigger example, you could take crafting. Making crafting as big as the other games within WoW would make another thing to work for. Of course, this doesn't just have to be weapons, it could be things for your house, and all this other kind of stuff. Crafting is a kind of endless thing that you could go in for. Now, these are things I think Blizzard should do to make the game better, and maybe unbeatable. Yeah, I can see the elements there. You've got to look at another game that tried this and failed. At least, maybe I'm being a little bit preemptive in saying that it failed, but for the love of God, I cannot see Vanguard beating WoW anytime soon. It's just not going to happen. Why is it not going to happen? It's not going to happen because, it's aimed at a hardcore market. It's all these games trying to compete for exactly the same market and missing the point of what WoW's got over there. People that play WoW, your businessmen, your people who are working 40 hours a week, all these other people that play WoW are not going to go and play Vanguard. The hardcore might go and play Vanguard, but they'll take one look at Vanguard, see an overly complex, difficult, hardcore MMO, and they'll say, no, it's too difficult. Yeah, there's all this awesome stuff in it, but it's too difficult. It looks like ass. It's too hard to level. I'm not going to bother. And this is what people are missing. This is what MMO developers are really missing in this. Now, just to get you thinking, here's what I would do if I was going to construct a WoW beta. First, you need an established world that is attractive. You can't just come up with a random world, because WoW didn't. WoW was based on a series of games that already worked. This is why I think Warhammer Online has the potential to win out, because that has a very strong background lore, and it's already got a fan base. You can't just build something from the ground up and expect it to attract millions of people. That's not how it works. You know, in gaming, you very, very rarely get runaway successes like that. It's like saying, you know, Final Fantasy XII. The Final Fantasy games are always successful. Command & Conquer is always successful. You know, even Supreme Commander is successful because it was based on a previous title, Total Annihilation, which had a cult following. It didn't sell all that well, but it had a cult following. It had something to ground itself in. Take another example of an RTS, Maelstrom. Has nothing to ground itself in whatsoever. It flopped. Doesn't mean it's a bad game, but it flopped. It had nothing to ground itself in, so we need a world. Now, what worlds have we got potentially? Warhammer is a good world. Warhammer 40k is a better one. Warhammer 40k has huge potential as an MMO FPS. Not as an MMORPG. It could not be a role-playing game, really, in my honest opinion, unless you were going to follow the lines of Inquisitor. You know, you're looking at the perspective of not being a space marine and stomping around and shooting things, but as being just a regular guy, a mercenary, an operative. If anyone's read the Eisenhorn or Ravenor books by Dan Abnett, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about there. Not superhuman, not godlike avatars of the Emperor. You're looking at something a little bit more down to earth. That can work. A Necromunda MMO, for instance. You know, Necromunda is a gang-based world. It's quite similar to Neocron, which again was a big flop, but there was other reasons for that. So you've got some backing there, you know, which is why I'm putting my money on Warhammer to possibly be the WoW beta. If there's gonna be a WoW beta, it's gonna be that game. Because I can't see Age of Conan doing it. Age of Conan doesn't have a massively great backstory. Conan is it's a very odd thing to base an MMO around, in my honest opinion. The world of Hyboria is not that great, to be quite honest. The film wasn't that great either. As nostalgic as you might be about it, it wasn't really amazing. So, right, okay, now what we're going to do. The leveling system. Leveling's fine. Zones. What's good about WoW? The way that you progress from zone to zone is logical and it makes sense and it's cool, because getting into a new zone is exciting. You've got to do that in this. You can't have 50 zones that look exactly the same. Now, the Warhammer Online, yeah, it has a chance of doing that. It does have the areas. Now, if it really pushes that and makes things look great and makes things feel alive, then that's cool. Now, what does WoW fail on? The zones are pretty much static. Nothing really changes. Now, you're looking at the developers behind Dark Age of Camelot. With Realm versus Realm. Something very important. Something that is player-made content. Something that makes things meaningful. Something that makes things dynamic. WoW lacks dynamic. If WoW could have dynamic and still be as friendly to newer players, yes, then you're looking at something that might be a WoW beta. What about PvP? Again, let's go back to Realm vs. Realm. Realm vs. Realm is a significantly better system. Now, if you want to go and find out about that, go on Wiki, Dark Age of Camelot. Go and look at what Realm vs. Realm actually is. Because it's a very interesting concept as regards to what we have now in WoW, which is meaningless world PvP, honor grinding, and arenas. Realm vs. Realm is a better system. What about RP? Now, potentially you could RP within Warhammer Online an awful lot better. It's a metagame, sure, but the lore is there, the background story is there. But you can't really RP much in WoW because everything's static, so the more dynamic, the more player-created stuff you put into it, the better. That's something that's really weak as regards to WoW. You know, crafting things is not really player-created stuff. It's static stuff that appears no matter what. You need player-created content. I'm not going to the level of Second Life here. I'm looking at housing, some customization, and player-made storylines because you've gone and done something, you know. It's like the questing in Warhammer Online is supposedly affected by what the other side does. That's understandable. That works for me. That's, in my opinion, just a little taste of what I would do if I was going to construct a WoW beta. More about that next week on Blue Plz. I've run out of time. Octail will be doing a solo show after this. Sadly, Hordak has come down with the bubonic plague. That is a good... Well, it's not so much a good thing, it's more of a bad thing. Yeah, let's go with the bad side. I'm done. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Check out our website, wcradio.com. Check out our archives, download our podcasts, rate us on iTunes, and dig us on Dig. All those many good things. This has been Blue Plz. I've been TotalBiscuit. Octail and Hordak coming in right after this. Stay tuned. You've been listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz, one of World of Warcraft's longest-running podcasts and shows. You can check out all the shows at wcradio.com. Be sure to dig us at dig.com if you like what we're doing, and rate us on iTunes. You can, in fact, download all of our other shows at wcradio.com.